My parents left me in debt to fund my brother's failed business. Now they want to meet my daughter. Should I let them back into my life? I never expected to be writing this, yet here I am seeking help from strangers on the internet about my family situation. My name is Johnny, and I am 32 years old. I've been estranged from my parents for over 8 years, and now they're attempting to reestablish contact. I'm not sure how to handle this, and I might really benefit from some outside advice. To comprehend my condition, you must first know about my childhood. I grew up in a little town in Ohio as the older of two sons. My younger brother, Bobby, 30, was born when I was just 2 years old. Bobby was unquestionably the golden child. He was outgoing, athletic, and charming, all qualities that I lacked. I was more introverted and concentrated on academics. Our parents, particularly our father, were always more interested in Bobby's activities than mine. Dad was a former high school football standout who never completely recovered from his golden days. Bobby's passion for athletics thrilled Dad. He'd spend hours in the backyard teaching Bobby how to throw a perfect spiral while I sat on the porch with my books. Mom wasn't as open about her preference, but it was still present. She'd swoon over Bobby's finger paintings and display them on the fridge, yet my report cards with straight A's were received with a simple "Good job, Johnny." I recall a particularly terrible occurrence when I was 10. I won the school science fair with a project about renewable energy. I was so pleased to show my parents, but when I arrived home, they were too busy celebrating Bobby's selection to the junior football team to look at my blue ribbon. As we grew older, the partiality became more apparent. In high school, I immersed myself in my academics, joining both the debate team and the math club. I was determined to enroll in a good college and become a doctor. Bobby, on the other hand, got by on his charisma and physical abilities. He was the standout quarterback, courting cheerleaders and attending parties on weekends. I still recall the night of my high school graduation. I was valedictorian and had spent weeks preparing my speech. As I stood on the stage, I looked around the audience for my family. Dad was there, but he was occupied recording Bobby, who was having fun with his friends in the back row. Mom at least appeared to be paying attention, but I noticed her frequently looking over at Bobby. Even in my success, I felt as if I was still in my brother's shadow. When it came time for college, I was accepted to a prominent university on a partial scholarship. I was overjoyed, but it was short-lived. My parents sat me down and informed me they couldn't afford to help with my tuition. They claimed they had been saving for years, but unexpected bills had arisen, and they just did not have the funds. I was devastated and determined. I took out college loans, worked part-time jobs, and completed undergrad. It was challenging, but I felt pleased with myself for doing it on my own. I worked as a teacher, a library assistant, and even spent the summer working night shifts at a 24-hour diner. I was so fatigued at times that I could barely keep my eyes open during lectures, but I persevered. Meanwhile, Bobby had determined that college was not for him. He worked at a neighborhood garage and spent his evenings drinking and partying. Our parents never expressed concern over his lack of direction. They just laughed and remarked, "That's our Bobby, always living in the moment." Then, during my senior year, I learned the truth. Bobby, who had been working at the garage for a few years, abruptly announced that he was starting his own vehicle repair shop. To my surprise, our parents had handed him their entire savings money. They had told me did not exist to launch his firm. I could not believe it. All those nights I'd spent worrying about my increasing student debt, all the times I'd had to choose between textbooks and proper meals, and they'd always had money. They just decided to give it to Bobby instead. When I challenged them about it, they attempted to defend their actions. They argued Bobby needed the money more because he didn't have a college degree, whereas I would be all right because I was intelligent and would earn a good living as a doctor someday. They didn't seem to understand or care about the tremendous debt I had incurred or the stress I was experiencing. That was the final straw for me. I completed my degree and was accepted into medical school, but I cut off practically all contact with my family. I only spoke with them around significant holidays, and even then it was quick and perfunctory. I immersed myself in my studies, determined to excel despite their lack of support. During my second year of medical school, I met Donna. She was a talented, compassionate law student. For the first time, I felt truly recognized and valued for who I am. We began dating, and she became my rock. She listened to me when I talked about my family troubles and never condemned me for choosing to distance myself. Following graduation, Donna and I married and relocated to Seattle for our respective residencies. We established a life together away from my family and the agony of my past. 2 years ago, we welcomed our daughter Lily into this world. Becoming a parent caused me to think about my own childhood, and I promised myself that Lily would always feel loved and supported, no matter what path she took in life. Fast forward to now, I'm a successful pediatrician. Donna is making waves at a well-known law firm, and Lily is a lively 2-year-old who keeps us on our toes. Life is nice, but I'm still saddened by my family's treachery. A few weeks ago, I received a call from my mother. It was the first time we had spoken in months. She was in tears, explaining that Bobby's business had failed and that he had returned to live with them. Apparently, he had made some poor decisions, gotten into debt, and was now unemployed. My parents had to refinance their home to assist him out. They suddenly want to reconnect with me. They've been calling and texting, requesting to visit and see their grandchild. My father even sent me an email expressing his pride in my accomplishments and his desire to make amends. Part of me wants to give them a chance. After all, they are my parents, and I miss having a family. I think about Lily and worry if I'm robbing her of grandparents. However, another part of me is angry and upset. They seem to want me in their lives now since Bobby has disappointed them, and they need someone to be proud of. I do not know what to do. Should I provide them another chance? Should I keep them at arm's length? Or should I stick with the distance I've developed over the years? Donna thinks I should at least listen to them. She has offered to be present when I speak with them as a buffer and support system. I'm divided between the want for a family and the need to shield myself. I am terrified of letting them back into my life. What happens if they hurt me again? What happens if they try to use me as a financial safety net now that Bobby has fallen from grace? But then I look at Lily and wonder if I'm letting my past influence her future. Any advice is much appreciated. How can I deal with this scenario without being a doormat or allowing my anger to control me? How can I protect my own family while perhaps mending my ties with my parents? I feel like I'm at a crossroads, unsure which course to choose. Thank you for your responses. I go through every remark and appreciate the variety of viewpoints you've provided. I wanted to give you an update on what has happened since my previous post. After much thought and several long conversations with Donna, I decided to meet with my parents, but on my own terms. I proposed that we meet in a neutral area, such as a quiet cafe near my business, without my wife or daughter present. I wanted to hear them out without quickly involving my new family members. The days leading up to the encounter were fraught with apprehension. I found myself snapping at Donna over minor issues. The night before, I sat in Lily's room long after she had fallen asleep, admiring her serene expression and wondering if I'd made the correct decision. The morning of the meeting, I arrived at the cafe early and chose a table in the corner so we could have some privacy. As I waited, I couldn't help but think of all the times I had sat waiting for my parents to arrive at my events, debate competitions, science fairs, and even my high school graduation party. They were often late, typically due to something involving Bobby, but this time they arrived early. I observed them approaching the cafe through the glass. They appeared older than I remembered and more worn down. My mother's hair was completely gray, and my father appeared to have shrunk. His once strong shoulders were now slightly slumped. They entered the cough, and for a little while we all stared at each other. Then my mother ran forward and hugged me passionately. I flinched at first, unaccustomed to such demonstrations of devotion from her, but I gradually hugged her back. My father stood awkwardly to the side, visibly uncomfortable. We sat down, and I let them talk first. My mom did most of the talking. She began by apologizing for the past, stating that they had understood how unfair they had been. She expressed how proud they were of my accomplishments and how they regretted not helping me more. Then came the kicker. She asked if I would consider giving Bobby another chance. I felt my stomach tighten. They described him as having hit rock bottom, and they believed he was now in a position to make positive changes. It struck me that once again their focus was on him. I hesitated, feeling the familiar urge to step into the role of mediator, but I knew I had to set boundaries. I explained that while I was open to reconnecting, I wasn't willing to become Bobby's savior again. It was my turn to prioritize my own family and protect my peace. Update: a few weeks had passed since my meeting with my parents, and life had taken on a new rhythm. The initial relief I felt after expressing my feelings had morphed into a complicated mix of hope and anxiety. I was still navigating the aftermath of that conversation. Donna and I had made a pact to approach this situation together. She was my anchor, always ready with a comforting word or a listening ear. We often spent evenings reflecting on what had happened, weighing the pros and cons of any potential reestablishment of ties with my parents. I appreciated her insights, which often illuminated aspects of the situation I hadn't considered. One evening, while we were curled up on the couch watching Lily play with her toys, I glanced at Donna and said, "Do you think I made the right choice?" The question lingered in the air. I wanted to believe that setting boundaries was the mature thing to do, but a nagging voice in the back of my mind reminded me of the warmth and security of family. "Of course you did," she replied, her tone steady. "You can't pour from an empty cup." Her words resonated with me, and I nodded, though doubts still fluttered in my mind. As the days turned into weeks, I maintained limited contact with my parents. Their phone calls became routine, though they often felt awkward and strained. My mother's enthusiasm about Lily was palpable, but I could tell she was still trying to navigate the line between showing interest and respecting my boundaries. My father remained distant, his conversations primarily revolving around my career and achievements, as if trying to grasp a world he had been absent from for so long. Then came an unexpected twist, an email from Bobby. It was long, filled with apologies and laments about his choices, sprinkled with a plea for help. He claimed to have hit rock bottom and expressed regret for how he had treated me over the years. At first I felt a flicker of sympathy. Perhaps he had genuinely changed. But as I continued reading, that flicker turned into frustration. His message quickly shifted from apologies to requests for financial support, pitching some vague business idea involving a food truck. It was the same old pattern, and my anger flared. I couldn't ignore the irony. While my parents had urged me to reconnect with Bobby, he seemed to have learned nothing from his past mistakes. It was a painful reminder that I was still viewed as a potential solution to their problems rather than an equal member of the family. That night I shared the email with Donna, and she listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief as I read aloud. "Are they serious?" she asked incredulously. "After everything, they want you to jump back into that?" "I just can't believe they think I'd even consider it," I replied, shaking my head. "It's like they haven't learned a thing." With a heavy heart, I decided to call my parents. The conversation was tense. I questioned them about Bobby's email, expressing my disappointment. They admitted they had encouraged him to reach out, believing it could help bring us closer together. I felt a surge of frustration at their continued manipulation. I reminded them of all the times they had overlooked my accomplishments for Bobby's whims. My mother was crying again, and my father was defensive, but I stood my ground. This was not about rescuing Bobby. It was about setting boundaries for myself. After that conversation, I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. I knew I had done the right thing by asserting my boundaries, but I was left with a sense of loss. The trust that had been tentatively rebuilt felt shattered. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying our conversation in my mind. Weeks went by, and my focus shifted back to my family. Donna and I had been creating our own little world. Lily was growing more curious every day, her laughter filling our home with warmth. One weekend, we took her to the park where she chased after Bubbles, her giggles echoing through the air. In those moments I felt an overwhelming sense of joy, reminding me of what truly mattered. But just as I was settling into this newfound clarity, I received another email from my parents. They expressed concern over Bobby's situation, detailing how they had sold their vacation home and taken out loans to help him. They seemed to believe that if I could only help him, it would somehow fix everything. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. Did they really think I would step back into the role of the fixer after all this? I took a moment before replying. I wrote a carefully crafted message expressing my empathy for Bobby's struggles, but reiterating that I wouldn't be his safety net. I reminded them that I needed to focus on my own family and that I wouldn't tolerate being manipulated any longer. After hitting send, I felt lighter, as if I had finally reclaimed my voice. In the days that followed, I noticed a shift. My parents seemed to be taking my words to heart, albeit slowly. Our conversations became slightly less strained, and there were fewer mentions of Bobby. Instead, they asked more about Lily, about our life, and about my work. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope. As autumn approached, I realized how much I had grown through this experience. I was learning to set boundaries, to stand up for myself. The memories of my childhood, the hurt and neglect, were still there. One evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, I read her favorite story, The Giving Tree. I paused, reflecting on the message of unconditional love. I wanted her to know that she was cherished for who she was, not for what she could do. That moment cemented my resolve. I would continue to nurture this love, ensuring that Lily would never experience the kind of neglect I had. The journey was far from over, but I felt more prepared to face whatever lay ahead. I knew I would continue to navigate the complexities of my family relationships, but now I had the tools to do so with intention and care. I was ready to face the challenges, to forge a path toward healing, and to create a future where my family could thrive together. Update 2. As winter approached, the leaves had turned and fallen, much like my old expectations for my family. I had spent the past few months focusing on my life with Donna and Lily, cultivating a sense of joy and stability that I had longed for. Our home was filled with laughter, warmth. I found solace in those moments, knowing I was building a different legacy for my daughter. I received sporadic updates from my parents. They seemed to be genuinely trying to adjust their priorities, even if it was a slow process. Their phone calls became less about Bobby and more about how they could support me and my family. It felt surreal. The shift was both unsettling and hopeful. I began to see glimpses of the parents I had once yearned for, and it filled me with cautious optimism. One evening, as I sat with Donna after putting Lily to bed, I received a text from my mother. She wanted to meet, just the three of us. The request sent a wave of anxiety through me, but I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps we could finally begin to mend what had been broken. We agreed to meet at a quiet cafe, a place that felt neutral yet comfortable. As the day approached, my heart raced with apprehension and excitement. Donna offered to join me for moral support, but I insisted on going alone. I needed to face this on my own terms. On the day of the meeting I arrived early, choosing a small table by the window. Watching the world go by, I reflected on how much had changed within me. I was no longer that timid boy seeking validation. I had carved out a life filled with love, purpose, and strength. When my parents arrived, they looked older and more subdued than I remembered. My mother greeted me with a cautious smile, while my father seemed reserved, perhaps still grappling with his feelings. We exchanged pleasantries before diving into the conversation. My mother began, her voice shaky yet sincere. She expressed her desire to reconnect, to truly understand what I had been through. She admitted that they had taken my accomplishments for granted and that they were learning to listen, to appreciate my journey. My father added his own apologies, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and determination. For the first time, I felt like they were genuinely trying to understand my perspective. It was a powerful moment, one I had dreamed of for years. I shared my experiences of growing up in their shadows, the loneliness I felt, and how those feelings had shaped my choices. As I spoke, I noticed tears in my mother's eyes, and my father looked away, his jaw clenched, processing the weight of my words. They listened intently, absorbing the pain I had carried for so long. When I finished, I took a deep breath, feeling lighter. I wasn't sure how they would respond, but I had finally spoken my truth. After a moment of silence, my mother reached across the table, taking my hand. "We want to change, Johnny. We want to be part of your life and Lily's life. We know it will take time, but we are committed to making it right." My heart swelled with a mix of hope and caution. I nodded, acknowledging the sincerity in her words, but also aware that rebuilding trust was a gradual process. I expressed that while I was open to rebuilding our relationship, as the conversation continued, I saw a small shift. They were asking questions, seeking to understand my world rather than dictating theirs. It was a significant step forward. By the time we left the cuff, I felt a cautious optimism. There was no instant resolution, but the seeds of healing had been planted. My parents were willing to do the work, and I was ready to give them the chance. In the weeks that followed, we maintained regular communication. They began to show genuine interest in my family, asking about Lily's milestones and sharing their own experiences. Our conversations became more meaningful, laced with humor and warmth. Eventually, I invited them over for a small dinner. As they entered our home, I watched Lily run into their arms, her laughter filling the room. In that moment, I realized that this was the family. I had always wanted a family where love could blossom, free from the weight of past grievances. As the years rolled on, the relationship with my parents continued to evolve. It was not without its challenges, but we were learning to navigate them together. My heart felt lighter as I embraced the complexity of family life, knowing that I was not repeating the patterns of my childhood. I was breaking cycles and forging new traditions. Looking back, I understood that healing is not a straight path, it is a winding journey filled with ups and downs. But with each step, I felt more empowered, more at peace. I had come to appreciate the value of boundaries, the strength found in vulnerability, and the importance of unconditional love. As I tucked Lily into bed each night, I whispered promises of love and support, ensuring she would never doubt her worth. In creating a nurturing environment for her, I had found my ultimate purpose. I had learned that family is not just about blood, it's about connection, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. And so, as the seasons changed, so did we. Each day was a step toward a brighter future, one where love triumphed over hurt and hope blossomed anew.